Hi, I'm Rachel. I sacrificed my career, took unpaid leave, and worked multiple side jobs to pay for my sister's dream wedding. And then, at her reception, surrounded by people I once thought loved me, she laughed and called me a loser. My mother just said, "Let's not make a scene." No one defended me. No one even blinked. That night, something inside me snapped. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. It didn't begin with a scream, not even a fight. It began with a sentence, soft, almost forgettable. Except, I never forgot it. We were at my parents' lake house in Vermont, just 5 p.m. on a Saturday. The evening light had taken on that golden tint that only shows up in early summer. My mother, Eleanor, was arranging flower centerpieces while my father, Thomas, filled glasses with champagne like it was a sacred ritual. Olivia, my younger sister by 4 years, sat perched on a barstool, scrolling through her phone like wedding planning was an inconvenience to her busy social life. I'd driven straight from the airport, still wearing my wrinkled clothes from the red-eye flight. I was tired, hungry, and already doing mental math on how to stretch my savings to cover another catering deposit I wasn't supposed to be paying for. I thought this weekend would be a reset, a simple family gathering before the wedding madness truly began. It wasn't. I just got the official confirmation from the Westlake Resort, Olivia announced mid-scroll, like she was sharing yesterday's weather report. They can accommodate the extra 50 guests. Mom gasped like it was breaking news. "Oh, darling, that's wonderful. The place will be absolutely perfect." I smiled automatically. She hadn't even looked up at me. "Well, you know luxury venues are expensive," Olivia added, eyes still on her screen. "But it's worth it. Totally worth it." My mother nodded, slow and dramatic, like she was contemplating world hunger. Then she turned to me and said, "Now, we don't expect you to cover it all, Rachel, but you've always been the practical one." She smiled as if that should feel like a compliment. No one else said a word, just kept sipping champagne like that sentence hadn't tilted the ground under me. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. That's how these things worked in my family. They never asked outright. They just dropped things at my feet and walked away. Later that night, after the plates were cleared and I drove back to my hotel, I sat in front of my laptop, staring at my bank statement. I'd been saving for a down payment on a house. Nothing extravagant, just a small 2-bedroom with a patch of garden. Something I could call mine. Something stable. $43,600 was the number in bold at the bottom corner of my screen. If I kept saving, I'd hit my goal by Christmas. But then Dad's voice came back to me. Wedding debt follows newlyweds like a shadow. I've seen it ruin marriages before they even begin. I stared at the screen a long time before I pulled up my banking app. 2 days later, I transferred $15,000 to Olivia's wedding account. Deposits for the venue, flowers, photographer, and the wedding planner I'd researched and vetted myself. I didn't tell her where the money came from. I didn't tell anyone. When she texted, "Thanks, sis," with a string of ring emojis, I just replied, "No problem." That night, I lay in bed listening to the hotel air conditioner rattle, reminding myself, it's just money. She's family. I can catch up. I've always caught up. But something felt off. The next morning, I opened Instagram during my coffee break and saw her latest post. A quote, "wedding dress shopping day, complete with a $900 pair of shoes and a designer handbag." In the background, someone shouted, "Bride goals." I stared at the screen while my coffee grew cold. The same twist in my stomach returned. Tight, silent, and sharp. 2 weeks later, I came home from a late shift at the hospital where I worked as a nurse and found a package sitting on my doorstep. My mom's handwriting scrolled across the top. "Olivia's mail. Thought you could sort through it." I sighed, dragged it inside, and sorted through a pile of glossy wedding magazines, registry confirmations, and unopened thank you cards. Then I saw an envelope with my name on it. Rachel Thornton, guarantor, was printed under my address. I froze. Guarantor? I slid it open with a letter opener and pulled out the document inside. Payment terms, credit limits, interest rates. My heart pounded. I never signed anything, except I must have. Somehow I sank onto the floor, pages scattered around me. I hadn't just helped her. I had signed something big. And in that moment, I realized I hadn't just helped her. I had signed away everything. I didn't sleep much that night. Even after I rechecked the loan papers, scrolled back through every email, every text thread, there it was, buried in a line I hadn't thought twice about. Acknowledgement of guarantor responsibility. All it took was a rushed e-signature when she claimed her floral contract needed a backup signer. Just in case. Just in case. She hadn't mentioned credit lines. She hadn't mentioned I'd be the one on the hook if she couldn't pay. Months passed after that night, and I didn't say a word. I kept working, doubled my shifts at the hospital, picked up weekend home health visits, skipped vacations to stretch my savings. My down payment plan forgotten. The house I'd once dreamt of replaced by a payment schedule that would follow me into my 40s. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Then came the invitation. Mom left me a voicemail. We're having a small dinner this Sunday. Olivia wants to discuss some wedding details. You should come. I almost didn't. I stared at the message on my phone 3 separate times that day. The third time, I deleted it. But not before hearing, "She misses you." Did she? Sunday rolled around faster than I'd hoped. I left work at 6, changed out of my scrubs into a clean blouse in the hospital locker room. I kept my comfortable nursing shoes on. There wasn't time to swing by home. As I pulled into my parents' driveway, I could already hear laughter through the windows. Their house was glowing. Candles in the entryway, a table dressed like we were expecting diplomats, not a family dinner about wedding centerpieces. I stepped inside. My shoes squeaked on the freshly mopped tile. My mom looked up from arranging roses and smiled like I'd shown up uninvited. "Well, you made it," she said. "Go freshen up. Dinner's almost ready." Olivia emerged from the kitchen in a white cocktail dress, her hair perfectly curled, makeup flawless. She looked like she belonged in a bridal magazine. She smiled at me. More teeth than warmth. "Did you come straight from the hospital?" she asked, sniffing the air. I let it go. That was the only way to survive these nights. Dinner was roast duck, asparagus with hollandaise, and truffle mashed potatoes. I found myself sitting between Dad and the coat rack. Olivia was seated squarely in the center, her wine glass full, her arms flailing as she talked about the honeymoon, the bridal shower, and something called a wedding content creator she'd hired. No one asked how I was. No one even made eye contact unless I refilled the water pitcher. Dad handed her a slim gift box halfway through dessert. "We know you've been stressed about the wedding details, sweetie. Thought this might help with organization." Inside was a sleek silver tablet, one I knew I had partially paid for when my checking account hit overdraft last week after covering the wedding band deposit. Olivia beamed. "Oh my God, thank you. This is amazing." She didn't thank me. She never did. I bit into a dry piece of tiramisu and tried to tune it all out. Tried not to care until the conversation shifted. "So," Olivia said, twirling her fork, "I got an offer from the wedding coordinator to upgrade our package. Private fireworks show over the lake. Oh, and a horse-drawn carriage entrance." "Oh, how lovely," Mom cooed. "Of course it's not cheap," continued Olivia with a smirk. "Hope you're ready to pick up extra shifts, sis." She said it like a joke. Light, playful, but every syllable hit like a slap. There was a pause, one of those tight, artificial silences people fill with nervous laughter. I smiled politely, even as something twisted deep in my chest. "Maybe," I said, forcing my voice steady, "you could consider something within your actual budget this time." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Me? Stick to a budget? That's rich coming from someone who wears the same 2 pairs of shoes and hasn't had a real vacation in 3 years." Laughter, brief, uneasy. Mom jumped in, shaking her head. "Let's not ruin dinner." Dad cleared his throat and passed the sugar bowl like we hadn't just watched someone throw grease on a fire. I finished my dessert in silence, then stood up. pretending I needed the bathroom. I walked down the hall, heart pounding, ears hot. I didn't cry. Not then. Not yet. In the bathroom, I ran cold water over my hands and stared at my own reflection. I looked tired. My eyes had gone from bright to hollow these last few months. I reached for my wallet, needing a mint to settle my stomach. But when I opened the flap, I saw it tucked behind my insurance card. A photo of Olivia and me as kids. It was one of those cheap strip mall snapshots. Both of us grinning, missing teeth, our cheeks painted with butterflies from a county fair. I stared at it, then quietly slid it out, folded it in half, and slipped it into the drawer beneath the sink. I didn't tear it, didn't curse her name. I just let it go. It was a small act, but it felt like the first breath I'd taken in weeks. On the drive home, I kept the radio off. The streets were half-lit, Vermont quiet in the way only small towns get after dark. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than they needed to. I kept hearing Olivia's voice. That's rich coming from someone who wears the same 2 pairs of shoes. She'd said it like a punchline, like I was a side character in her show. And for the first time, I let the thought in. Maybe I really was just the loser in their story. That thought echoed in my head as I tossed my keys in the bowl and slid onto the couch that night. The springs squeaked. I didn't care. I was too tired to change, too wired to sleep. Around 1:47 a.m., exact time burned into my memory, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. I almost ignored it, assuming it was a patient alert or some junk email. But the notification wasn't from the hospital app. It was from my credit monitoring service. New credit inquiry under your name. View alert. I blinked, sat up straighter, clicked the link, and just like that, sleep vanished for good. A new wedding venue contract had been opened in my name. The Westlake Resort. A different package from what had been previously discussed. Confused, I scrolled through the file. There it was in bold letters. Co-signer. Rachel Thornton, relationship, financial guarantor. My hands started to sweat. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't even heard about a venue change. I stared at the line, reread it, and felt my throat tighten. Clicking the contact number listed, I waited through 3 rings. A woman picked up. Groggy but polite. Westlake Resort Wedding Services. This is Melanie. I just got a notice about a contract under my name. I began, trying to keep my voice calm. It says I'm the co-signer for the Thornton Barrett wedding package. I didn't apply for anything. She asked for verification. I gave it. After a pause, she said plainly, "You're listed as the responsible party. Your sister Olivia said you agreed to co-sign and handle the deposit." I couldn't respond for a full beat. My jaw clenched so hard I felt my molars ache. "I never signed anything," I said finally. She sounded hesitant. "I mean, it was done electronically. Maybe she did say you were like her financial backup." I managed a strained thanks and hung up. Then I got up, turned on my laptop, and pulled up the document. I read it 3 times, every term and clause. Then I quietly emailed it to my work inbox with the subject line, evidence. I didn't text Olivia. I didn't call Mom. I didn't rage on social media. I didn't slam things or scream. I sat in silence with a cup of black coffee and a dull ache behind my eyes, the kind that sits between anger and realization. I had crossed some line without knowing it and couldn't walk back. That weekend, I drove south to Boston. Olivia had left a box of bridal magazines and sample invitations at home she claimed were essential and couldn't live without. I figured since I was off Sunday, I'd deliver it. Clear one thing from my mental list. She was waiting in the lobby of her apartment building, air-kissing my cheek like she was hosting a charity gala. Her hair was perfectly curled, designer shoes, gold phone case. "You made it," she said, as if I'd been an Uber. "The girls are upstairs. They've been dying to meet you." I didn't say much, just followed her up 2 flights and into a living room that looked more like an Instagram set than an apartment. 4 women sat around sipping mimosas. They barely glanced up. "This is Rachel," Olivia said with a shrug. "She helps me out sometimes." One of the girls raised an eyebrow. "Oh, like your assistant or something?" There it was. I didn't answer. I didn't correct them. I just placed the box near the corner, nodded once, and turned around. Olivia called after me. Hey, you don't want to hang a bit? I didn't even look back. On the drive north, I kept my windows cracked just enough to feel the wind slice in. It kept me awake, kept the heat out of my chest from boiling over. I thought about those girls, how none of them knew me, how they never would, because Olivia never wanted them to. She'd erased me, not in a loud, public way, not with cruelty I could call out. No, she'd done it gently, casually, like a blurry edit in a photo, cropping out what didn't fit her story, and I had let her. Back home, I didn't kick off my shoes or grab dinner. I went straight to my desk, opened a new folder on my laptop, named it For Later. I dragged in the venue contract PDF, the email trail, screenshots of bank transfers, Venmo payments, gift receipts, old texts where she'd said things like, "Can you spot me till next week and I'll pay you back after the engagement photos?" I didn't know what I was building, but I knew I needed it, because someday someone would ask me why I stopped, why I finally said no, and I wanted to be ready. It was a Tuesday. I remember that because Tuesdays were always hectic at the hospital. Medication renewal day, meaning chaos, long waits, and patients breathing down your neck for their prescriptions. I had just finished logging a patient's vitals when I sat down in the break room and opened Facebook to scroll mindlessly during lunch. That's when I saw it. A shared post from my parents' old friend Margaret. Caption: "So proud of this girl for staying strong. Let's help Olivia have her dream wedding despite family hardship." I blinked, clicked, then stared. Olivia's GoFundMe page. Help make our wedding day special. I read her words slowly, as if my brain couldn't quite register the combination of letters. After our parents had to divert their retirement fund to medical bills, I've been scraping by. My older sister tries, but she can't always help. I'm doing this alone. Underneath was a photo of her on the floor of her apartment, bundled in a sweater, clutching a wedding magazine to her chest like it was all she had left. The room had good lighting, too good. The bed was staged, the angle purposeful. And then another shot. Her standing in front of a window, head turned slightly, tear tracking one cheek. I didn't know when she'd learn to cry on cue, but she was good at it. My hands trembled. $3,500 every month. Venues, flowers, dresses, photographer, coordinator, hair trials. I paid it quietly, steadily, while she was online collecting sympathy money from strangers, from our neighbors, for Margaret and her church group. She called me someone who tries. I exited the app, walked outside, and sat on the bench next to the hospital entrance. I didn't cry. I just opened the browser and printed the GoFundMe page, then took screenshots of every comment, every donation. $20 from Uncle Peter, $30 from my high school chemistry partner, $50 from someone I didn't even recognize. I forwarded it all to my personal email. Then I reopened the folder on my laptop that I'd created the night I found out about the venue contract. For Later now had new content. Before I left the hospital, I dug through my desk drawer and pulled out a dog-eared business card. Melissa Harding. Legal services. She'd come in months ago, when her father was admitted for pneumonia. I remembered her because she insisted on bringing coffee for the entire nursing staff, even though I told her it wasn't necessary. I typed out an email right there in the break room before heading home. Subject: hypothetical question body. Melissa, if someone were raising money online using misleading information, say, claiming financial hardship while secretly being supported by someone else, would that be considered fraud, legally speaking? Hypothetically. Rachel, I didn't expect an answer right away. Legal people work on their own time, but just sending the question felt like putting a foot down. Dinner that night was a microwave meal that had dried out around the edges. The sauce had congealed into the pasta. I didn't bother reheating. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the wall across from me, the one where Olivia's graduation photo used to hang. I'd taken it down last week without even realizing it. My fingers had just lifted it, like muscle memory, and placed it in a drawer. I thought about the time she failed that communications class her sophomore year. She called me sobbing. I drove down that same night with a tub of ice cream and spent hours on her dorm floor helping her prepare for the makeup exam. She'd curled into me like a child, whispered she didn't know if she belonged there. Was it real, that fear? or a dress rehearsal for this narrative she was spinning now, where she's the struggling bride, the underdog, while I'm the background noise. I typed a message. "We need to talk," then stared at it for a full minute before deleting it. What was there left to say? She'd written her story and I wasn't in it. Not really. Not as a sister, not as a person. Just a vague idea, a helper, a stepping stone. I turned off the lights and left the dishes in the sink. It was nearly midnight when my phone buzzed again. An email. Subject. Hypothetical question body. Rachel. Technically, if someone raises funds under false pretenses, especially if it causes real harm to others or is used for personal benefit instead of the stated reason, it can fall under civil fraud. There's a process to report this. Let me know if you want to talk more. Melissa attached was a link. Report a GoFundMe violation. I stared at the screen for a long time. Did I click it? No, not yet. I closed the laptop, turned off my lamp, and as I lay there in the quiet, I whispered to the dark, "Let her keep digging." It had rained that morning. One of those soft, intermittent Vermont drizzles that didn't soak your coat but made everything feel damp. Your shoes, your shoulders, your spirit. I parked my car 2 houses down from my parents' driveway, more out of habit than necessity. I hadn't called ahead, I just showed up, the way family used to. Inside a small canvas bag on the passenger seat was the gift I'd spent 3 months making, a hand-bound photo album of Olivia's journey from childhood to bride-to-be. I'd restored every old family photo I could find, yellowed edges, ink-smudged dates, water stains from the attic storage. I'd scanned, color-corrected, printed, and arranged them chronologically. Even slipped in captions like, 4th of July, 1997, Dad in the grill, he never figured out how to light properly. I wanted it to mean something. For once, I wanted to bring something that wasn't a bill paid or a favor done, but a gift that was uniquely mine. When I stepped inside, the bridal shower had already started. Balloons, chocolate-dipped strawberries, women I barely recognized sipping champagne from flutes, with Team Bride etched in cursive. I caught Mom across the room and walked toward her, album tucked under my arm. But before I reached her, Olivia swooped in, that effortlessly theatrical way she had. She plucked the album from my grip and beamed. "Mom, this is from both of us." She looked surprised, then delighted. "You two did this?" Olivia nodded, slipping her arm into Mom's like she belonged there more than I ever did. She hugged her tightly. "You always remember the little things, sweetie." I stood there, hands now empty, like I'd simply delivered a package instead of created a memory. A few minutes later, I heard Mom in the kitchen. Olivia really brought everyone together for this wedding. She has such a talent for it. I didn't correct them. Didn't say, "Actually, I made that," or "She didn't even know it existed until today." I just poured myself a glass of flat champagne and found a chair by the window. Sometime later, I wandered into the kitchen while most guests clustered around the gift table. Mom was organizing dessert plates, her earrings bouncing with each motion. I leaned against the counter and said quietly, "It's getting a little hard, Mom." She looked up, barely pausing. "What is?" I hesitated. Being here, watching her take credit for everything, feeling like I don't exist. She set down a plate with a ceramic clink. "Rachel, come on. You're always so sensitive. It's always about how someone wronged you. You make yourself the victim every time." That word, victim. I'd heard it before, from Olivia's lips once, in a whisper she didn't know I caught. But from Mom? From the woman who used to braid my hair, who taught me how to take temperatures and bandage scrapes, who once said I'd make an incredible nurse because I had healing hands. I didn't reply. There was no fight left in me. She hummed a little tune under her breath, like our conversation had been nothing more than background noise. Later, upstairs, I lay on the twin mattress in my childhood bedroom, staring at a ceiling that had once held glow-in-the-dark stars. Now it was just paint, faded and chipped, like the rest of this house. Framed pictures lined the dresser. Olivia at prom, Olivia at graduation. Olivia in her cap and gown, all teeth and triumph. My photos? One from 3rd grade. The one where my pigtails were uneven and I had a scab on my chin from falling off my bike. I sat up and reached into my purse, pulled out the venue contract, still folded, still creased in that way paper remembers pain, the agreement I never signed but apparently did. I didn't open it. I just held it, a reminder that even in silence, even in generosity, someone could rewrite your story without your permission. I didn't cry. Not anymore. At dawn, I packed my things, slipped out of the house like a guest who had overstayed. In the hallway, just before I reached the door, I heard laughter drifting from the kitchen. Olivia's voice. She's so dramatic, it's always about her feelings. That one sentence hit harder than anything Mom had said the day before. There was a clink of plates, a fresh round of laughter. No one noticed I was leaving. I didn't slam the door, but I didn't look back either. I had less than a quarter tank left, and a headache from skipping breakfast. The sun had dipped below the edge of the Vermont skyline, casting that amber haze over the gas station lot as I pulled in, shoes sticky on the mat from a long shift at the hospital. All I wanted was to fill up and go home. I slid my card into the pump. Declined. I tried again, slower this time. Holding my breath, like that would somehow change the outcome. Declined. Maybe the machine was busted. I grabbed my phone, walked inside, and handed my card to the guy behind the counter. He tried it 3 times. "Ma'am, it's saying your account is locked." "Locked?" I blinked, said thank you with whatever politeness I could gather, and stepped outside to sit in my car. My fingers felt disconnected from my brain as I opened my banking app. Not zero. Frozen. Access denied. I tried the help chat, but it redirected me to the fraud department. Within minutes, I was on the phone with a voice far too calm for the kind of news she was about to deliver. "There was an alert triggered from a linked credit agreement," she said. "Someone connected your account to a wedding vendor contract flagged for irregularities. It's a precaution until we verify your authorization." I could feel my lungs tightening. I didn't authorize anything. I don't even live in Boston. "Well, your name is listed as a financial guarantor. It's now under audit." I sat in stunned silence. "We recommend filing an identity theft report," she added. Identity theft? This wasn't some stranger across the country. This was Olivia. That venue, that lie. This was an attack. I hung up and stared straight ahead. A couple pulled into the pump next to me, laughing. Normal people with normal gas, with access to their money. I wasn't angry. Not at first. I was empty. Then came the voice in my head. Mom's voice. "You're too dramatic." Was this dramatic? Sitting in my car, unable to buy gas because my little sister played poor while draining me dry? No, this wasn't drama. This was theft. This was war. I drove home on fumes, the car coughing every few blocks. As soon as I got inside, I went straight to the filing cabinet, yanked out my for later folder, and spread everything on the kitchen table. Contracts, screenshots, bank statements, the whole mess. Then I called Melissa, the legal aid woman I'd once helped during her father's hospital stay, who owed me nothing but had offered something anyway. "Yeah," I said. "It's time to meet." 3 days later, I came home from work and saw a notification pop up on my phone. Olivia Thornton posted a new video. I clicked without thinking. The caption read, "Wedding gift reveal for the best man I've ever known, #SoGrateful." The video opened with soft music, candles, and her fiancé's voice saying, "No way. Are you serious?" He opened a velvet box. Inside was a silver pocket watch with an inscription. I knew that watch. I'd bought it for Olivia's fiancé as a welcome to the family gift the night they got engaged. I'd worked extra weekend shifts for a month, skipped meals, walked to work to save gas, just so I could afford something special with meaning. She'd cried when I gave it to her to present to him. Told me no one had ever believed in their relationship like I did. Now it was his gift to her. "He deserves the world," the caption read. I didn't flinch, didn't curse, didn't throw the phone. I saved the video, filed it, and moved on. That night, while pasta boiled half forgotten on the stove, I sat down at my desk. One by one, I pulled up my emergency contact forms at the hospital and removed Olivia's name. Then I opened a blank document. Subject: Financial Independence Notice. I wrote the whole thing out. How I was no longer financially supporting Olivia. How any further charges in my name would be met with legal recourse. How I hoped they'd understand this wasn't punishment, it was protection. I didn't send it. Not yet. I saved it in drafts. I leaned back in the chair, arms crossed, heart steady for once. Let them call me cold. I'd rather be cold than invisible. I pulled into their driveway just after 10 on a Saturday morning, the heat already clinging to the edges of my sleeves. The folder on the passenger seat felt heavier than it should have been. Paper and ink, yes, but more than that. Every page inside it was a weight I'd carried in silence. My hands weren't shaking when I rang the doorbell. That surprised me, Dad answered. Rachel, didn't expect you this early. I figured we should talk while there's still daylight. He didn't ask what about. In the living room, Mom had her second cup of tea. Olivia wasn't there, thankfully. I sat across from them, pulled the folder from my tote bag, and laid the pages out on the coffee table. Statements, screenshots, even the video of the watch. Mom gave it a glance and said, "You printed out Instagram videos now? I'm showing you how deep this goes." She crossed her arms, looking tired more than alarmed. Why bring this here? Because I've been funding her life while she makes a mockery of mine, and you both pretend not to see it. Dad leaned forward, scanning a document. This venue contract, this says you co-signed. I didn't. And the credit freeze? Because of that contract. Mom looked at me like I was wasting her Saturday. Rachel, that's between you and your sister. Don't drag us into your jealousy. I blinked. Jealousy? She's building a wedding on my back. You've always supported her dreams over mine. You chose nursing, Dad said. You chose that path. I chose it so she could go to her fancy private college. I picked up extra shifts so she could study abroad. Dad held up a hand. No one forced you. I didn't say anyone did, but don't pretend like my sacrifices were nothing. Mom sighed. Look, Rachel, we appreciated your help, but don't compare yourself to Olivia. You've always been different. That was it? Not, we're sorry. Not, we didn't know. Just, you're different. I felt a cold stillness slide into my chest, the kind that doesn't beg for validation anymore. I stood, gathered my folder, and left their house without another word. Outside, the sun was too bright. I walked 2 blocks before I realized I'd left my car. I turned back, but halfway down the street, I heard someone call my name. Rachel? I turned. It took a second to place him. Michael Reynolds, high school debate team, senior class president. He used to tell me I was the smartest girl in our class. He looked good. Broad shoulders, a military haircut, wedding ring. He smiled. Didn't think I'd run into you here. Still in town? Yeah, I nodded. Still around. You still at the hospital? I hesitated. Just between assignments. He nodded politely. Well, I always thought you'd end up running your own clinic or something. You used to talk about that specialized care center for veterans. Still dreaming of it. I smiled thinly. Something like that. He mentioned his kids, his wife, the new house near Lake Champlain. I wished him well, wished I meant it. When I got back in my car, I stared at my reflection in the mirror for a long minute. Still around, still working, still helping. That night, I pulled out my journal and wrote, I wasn't the loser. I just believed the wrong story. I listed everything I had done for Olivia. Every transfer, every grocery trip, every venue payment. 3 pages, typed, single-spaced. At the bottom I wrote, final tally, final straw. In the morning I opened my email and attached the letter I drafted days ago to my parents. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't long, just a few sentences. This isn't war, but it is closure. I won't be funding or facilitating anything for Olivia going forward. I wish you both health and clarity. I didn't sign it with love, just my name. I turned off my phone and drove straight to the legal aid office. The receptionist recognized me. "You here to see Melissa?" "Yes," I said, "and I'm ready to talk options." I thought that was the end, until she came knocking, crying, begging, and lying. It was almost 9 o'clock in the evening, and I'd just gotten out of the shower when I heard the knock. Not frantic, just persistent. The kind that waits you out. Through the peephole, I saw her. Olivia. Mascara streaked like paint on wet canvas, arms crossed tight like they were holding her together. When I opened the door, I didn't say a word. "You can't just cut me off," she blurted, voice already cracking. "You don't understand what I'm dealing with." I stayed in the doorway, one hand on the knob. I didn't invite her in. Not anymore. "Please," she continued. "They're threatening to cancel the venue. I can't pay everything. I've been juggling." "You mean collecting?" I said. Her breath hitched. I didn't lie. Not really. I just stretched the truth. "You were helping. What's the harm in saying you weren't?" I didn't respond. She sniffled. "Mom and Dad said you'd cave. That you always do." That sentence slid down my spine like ice. And just like that, the years of exhaustion, of scraping by while they smiled wide at her, settled into something dense, permanent. I didn't reply. I simply closed the door. 2 days passed. I went to work. I changed my oil. I folded laundry while reruns played. I didn't speak to anyone about what had happened. Then on Wednesday evening, my cousin Morgan texted, "You need to see this. It's gross." Attached was a screen recording from Instagram Live, Olivia's bachelorette weekend at a vineyard. Someone had reposted it before she could delete it. In the clip, Olivia lounged on a sunbed, sipping from a champagne flute. Her friend asked, "How do you even afford all this stuff? The dress alone must have cost a fortune." Olivia grinned. "Easy. My sister's got this martyr complex. Just say your family poor." And she opened her wallet. The room erupted in laughter. "She thinks she's the smart one. Bless her heart." That last line, it stung in a different way. Like stepping on a splinter you didn't know was there. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my phone. I just walked to the closet, pulled out my file folder labeled "For Later," and added a sticky note to the top. Tonight I stopped being her story. The next morning, I booked a private room at a small family-owned Italian restaurant downtown. I sent the invite to Mom, Dad, and 2 aunts who'd always said, "You girls need to stick together." They came, of course they did. Mom wore pearls. Dad adjusted his cuffs like it was a wedding rehearsal. Olivia showed up in designer heels I'd recognize anywhere because I'd paid for them. When everyone had settled and ordered drinks, I reached into my purse and pulled out a small Bluetooth speaker. Without introduction, I pressed play. Olivia's voice filled the room. "Easy. My sister's got this martyr complex. Just say your family poor." Laughter. "She thinks she's the smart one. Bless her heart." Silence. Olivia's face drained of color. Mom's lips parted. Dad blinked as though he didn't understand English anymore. I stood slowly, reached into my tote, pulled out a crisp cashier's check. $1, I said, setting it in the center of the table. "That's all I owe her now." Then beside it, I placed the folder, 3 inches thick, tabbed, documented, dated. Every dollar, every sacrifice, every lie. I looked at no one in particular. Keep it or burn it, doesn't matter. Mom finally found her voice. "Rachel, let's not." But I was already walking out. I didn't slam the door, didn't pause for effect. On the sidewalk, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. There was no applause, no dramatic background music, no hug from a long-lost relative. Just air and peace. And silence I finally owned. And she thought it was over. But the bill for all her lies was just coming due. The morning after the dinner, I woke up not to silence but to a storm brewing online. I hadn't posted anything. I didn't need to. But Olivia had. She filled her social media with cryptic quotes. "Sometimes blood doesn't mean loyalty," and "betrayal always comes from the ones closest to you." It was the kind of curated mess she always crafted after destroying something and pretending she was the victim. Only this time, it wasn't working. Underneath her captions, comments began to shift. One read, "Wait, I thought your sister was covering your wedding costs." Another, "Didn't she pay for that venue deposit too?" And then someone posted a link to a public tweet from Morgan. Funny how the truth sounds like betrayal to a liar. The cracks were visible now, and they weren't mine. Around noon that day, I was organizing my nursing textbooks when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked through the front window. Mom and Dad, not Olivia. I didn't open the door immediately. I took my time sorting papers, rinsing my coffee mug, wiping it dry with a dishcloth. Then I answered. Mom's eyes were already glassy. Dad's jaw was clenched, his voice sharper than I'd heard in years. "You embarrassed her," he said. "You embarrassed us." I didn't flinch. I just tilted my head slightly. No. I stopped covering for her. She embarrassed herself. Mom tried to reach for something softer. "You could have just talked to us." "I did," I said, voice steady. "Many times." "You just didn't hear me." They didn't stay long. There was no apology, but there weren't any threats either, just silence. And when the front door closed behind them, it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like a boundary. That weekend, I finally started packing. The new apartment was small, just over 700 square feet, near the hospital, but it was mine. I hadn't even told most of my family yet, just my supervisor at work and Morgan. I boxed up clothes, books, labeled cables and cords. I took my time. In the back of a drawer I'd nearly forgotten, I found a small velvet box. The silver locket, the one I'd given her when she graduated, the one I saw later in her fiancé's hands like it meant nothing. I turned it over in my palm. The silver chain caught a slice of light through the window. It used to feel heavy with guilt and resentment. But today, it just felt like metal. I placed it in a box marked donations. Not to punish her, not as a symbol, just because I no longer had to give anything away. That evening, Michael texted me. "Heard what happened. Proud of you." I stared at the message a while before typing. It took me too long, but I got there. He didn't say more. He didn't have to. The next day, I met Morgan for coffee. She slid into the booth like she always had, shoulders loose, phone in hand, ready with the latest family gossip. But this time, she didn't bring drama. She brought grace. "You were always the strong one," she said over her mug. I smiled, and for the first time, I didn't correct her. The last box I packed was labeled New Beginnings. It held fresh notebooks, a stethoscope still in its packaging, and business cards I'd designed myself. Rachel Thornton, RN, Specialized Veteran Care. A dream I was no longer putting on hold. 3 weeks later, I stood on the balcony of my new place, barefoot, warm coffee in hand. The morning air rolled in crisp and clean. My phone buzzed with a text from the hospital administrator. My proposal for the Veterans Outpatient Clinic had moved to the next approval stage. I ran my fingers along the rim of my mug and whispered, more to myself than anyone. This was the last thing I gave up without asking if I deserved more, and I didn't need their permission to reclaim it. The night before Olivia's wedding arrived like any other Thursday. No fanfare, no dramatic storms, just the steady tick of my wall clock and the distant sound of traffic below my apartment window. I sat cross-legged on my couch, reviewing patient files for the next day's shift, when my phone lit up with a text from Mom. "Please reconsider coming tomorrow. She's your sister." I didn't respond immediately. I set the phone down, finished my notes on Mr. Grayson's medication schedule, and closed the folder. Only then did I pick up the phone again, typing carefully, "I'm working tomorrow. My patients need me." It wasn't a lie. I had volunteered for the shift weeks ago, knowing exactly what day it was. But it wasn't the whole truth either. Even if I'd been free, I wouldn't have gone. Some bridges stay burned. Mom replied within seconds. "Your sister only gets married once." I almost laughed at the irony. Olivia only gets married once, but I only get one life to stop giving pieces of it away. I didn't write that. Instead, I simply replied, "Give them my best." I set my phone to do not disturb and went to bed early. Tomorrow would be a long shift. Morning arrived with gentle rain against my windows, and the kind of soft light that makes hospital corridors feel less sterile. I pulled my hair back, donned my scrubs, and arrived at the nurse's station 20 minutes early. The familiar rhythm of medicine carts, call buttons, and monitor beeps welcomed me like an old friend. "You're not at the wedding?" Diane, the charge nurse, asked as she handed me the daily assignment sheet. News traveled fast in small towns. I shook my head. This is where I need to be. She didn't push, just nodded and moved on to discuss Mr. Grayson's pain management plan. The day unfolded with its usual challenges and rewards. I held an elderly woman's hand while the doctor delivered difficult news. I celebrated with a young father when his lab results came back clear. I laughed with a 7-year-old as I changed his bandages, distracting him with stories about superhero nurses. Not once did I check my phone. Not once did I wonder about white dresses or flower arrangements or champagne toasts. This was my world now, helping, healing, but on my terms, not as someone's ATM or emotional punching bag. At 4:30 p.m., just as I was updating charts at the nurse's station, Diane tapped my shoulder. "Rachel, there's someone asking for you at reception." My heart skipped a beat. The wedding would be over by now. Had Olivia come to make another scene? Had Mom tracked me down for a final guilt trip? "Who is it?" I asked, already steeling myself. Diane shrugged. "Some military guy. Said he's an old friend." "Michael?" I hadn't seen him since that day on my parents' street. Curious, I made my way to the front desk. He stood there in full dress uniform, his posture perfect, his presence commanding attention from everyone in the waiting area. But it was his smile that caught me. Warm, genuine, unchanged from our high school days. "Michael," I said, surprise evident in my voice. "What are you doing here?" He stepped forward. "I had a meeting at the VA hospital. Thought I'd stop by, see if you were working." Something didn't add up. The VA hospital was 30 miles away. "That's quite a detour," I said, studying his face. He shrugged, a gesture that seemed at odds with his formal attire. "Maybe I wanted an excuse to see you again. Properly this time, not just passing on the street." I felt a warmth spread across my cheeks that had nothing to do with the hospital's overactive heating system. "I'm off in 30 minutes, I heard myself say. There's a decent coffee shop across the street." He nodded. "I'll wait." Those 30 minutes were the longest of my shift. I finished my charts with meticulous care, gave detailed handoff notes to the night nurse, and changed out of my scrubs with more attention than usual. When I finally emerged in jeans and a simple blouse, he was still there, scrolling through his phone. He looked up immediately. "Ready?" The coffee shop was quiet for a Thursday evening. We found a corner table, ordered, and settled into conversation that flowed easier than it had any right to after 15 years apart. "So," I finally said, "are you going to tell me why you're really here? The truth this time." He set down his cup. "I heard about the wedding. About what happened with your sister, your parents." I stiffened. Small-town gossip travels fast. "Morgan called me," he admitted. "She was worried about you being alone today." I almost laughed. "I'm at work every day. I'm alone most evenings. Today is no different." He leaned forward. "Isn't it?" Something in his directness caught me off guard. Michael had always been perceptive, even in high school. It was what made him such a formidable debate opponent. "Maybe," I conceded. "But I'm okay with it. Better than I've been in years, actually." He nodded slowly. "I believe you. But Morgan didn't call me just because she was worried. She called because I asked her to." I blinked. "What?" "After I ran into you that day, I couldn't stop thinking about you. About what you said. Still dreaming of that Veterans Care Center. I work with the VA now, Rachel. I've been helping establish specialized care units across New England." My breath caught. That's quite a coincidence." His smile turned sheepish. "Not entirely. I've followed your career quietly. Morgan kept me updated over the years. I always knew you'd make an exceptional nurse. He paused, searching for words. I guess I've been waiting for the right time to reconnect. And you thought my sister's wedding day, was it? I couldn't help the slight edge in my voice. I thought the day you finally stood up for yourself might be, he countered. Morgan said something changed in you recently. Said you were finally putting yourself first. I stared at my coffee, watching the cream create patterns on the surface. It's been a process. Tell me about this Veterans Center, he said, changing the subject with graceful ease. What's your vision? And just like that, we spent the next hour discussing integrated care models, trauma-informed approaches, and community support networks. His eyes never glazed over. His questions were thoughtful, his suggestions insightful. For the first time in years, someone was actually listening to my dreams, not dismissing them or making them secondary to their own. As we were leaving, he handed me his card. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Reynolds, Veterans Affairs Medical Initiative. My team reviews proposals next month, he said. I'd love to see yours on my desk. I took the card, our fingers brushing momentarily. I'll think about it. Do more than think, he said, his voice gentle but firm. You've spent enough time putting others' dreams ahead of yours. I didn't know then that this conversation would change everything. I didn't know that 6 months later, my proposal would not only be approved but fast-tracked with Michael's department. I didn't know that our coffee meetings would become regular, then daily, then something more. All I knew, standing there in the fading light of a Thursday evening, was that for the first time in forever, I felt seen, not as someone's support system or backup plan, but as Rachel Thornton, nurse, dreamer, survivor. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 months after Olivia's wedding. Thick, cream envelope, gold embossing, my name written in elegant calligraphy. Inside was a card inviting me to the grand opening of the Thornton Veterans Care Center. My project, my dream, now a reality, thanks to Michael's advocacy and my own relentless work. I ran my fingers over the raised lettering, remembering all those nights I'd stayed up drafting proposals that no one in my family had ever asked to read. My phone rang. It was Morgan. Did you get it? She asked without preamble. Just now, I replied. It's really happening. Of course it is, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. You're finally letting it happen. We chatted about logistics, the ribbon-cutting ceremony, the press that would be there, the veterans who would benefit from the specialized care programs I'd designed. Just as we were wrapping up, Morgan hesitated. There's something else. Olivia's back from her honeymoon. My stomach tightened. And things aren't great. The GoFundMe stuff came out. Some of her bridesmaids posted about it. The wedding venue is threatening legal action for misrepresentation in their fundraising. She and James had a huge fight when he found out about the loans. I closed my eyes. That's not my problem anymore. I know, Morgan said quickly. I'm not saying it is. I just thought you should know. Your parents have been calling everyone for money to help them sort it out. Not me, I said. It wasn't a question. No, she confirmed. Not you. After we hung up, I sat with that information, turning it over in my mind like a strange object I wasn't sure what to do with. There was a time when news of Olivia's troubles would have sent me rushing to fix them, to empty my bank account, to sacrifice my own stability. Now I felt a curious detachment, not joy at her struggles. I wasn't that person, but a calm certainty that her choices were her own to manage. I placed the invitation on my refrigerator with a magnet and went about my day. The morning of the grand opening dawned clear and crisp, the Vermont autumn painting the trees in fiery oranges and reds. I stood in front of my mirror, smoothing the lapels of my navy blue blazer, adjusting the silver pin on my collar. A small caduceus, the symbol of healing. Michael arrived to pick me up precisely on time, resplendent in his full dress uniform, the general's stars on his shoulders catching the light. He'd received his promotion just weeks earlier, partly due to the success of our joint initiative with the VA. Ready for your big day? He asked, pressing a gentle kiss to my cheek. As I'll ever be, I replied, trying to calm the butterflies in my stomach. The drive to the center was quiet, comfortable. Michael's hand rested on mine, a steady presence that had become increasingly important in my life over the past months. We weren't officially dating, both too cautious, too focused on our careers for labels. but there was something undeniable growing between us. Something built on mutual respect and shared purpose. The parking lot was already filling when we arrived. Local news vans, politicians' cars, veterans and their families, hospital administrators, all gathered to celebrate the opening of a facility that would provide specialized care to those who had served our country. As we walked toward the entrance, Michael squeezed my hand. "Remember, this is your moment. You earned it." I nodded, taking a deep breath as we approached the gathered crowd. The hospital CEO was already at the podium, making introductory remarks. I scanned the audience, recognizing colleagues, community leaders, and to my surprise, Morgan standing near the back. She wasn't alone. Mom and Dad stood beside her, looking uncomfortable but present. And behind them, partially hidden by a tall man in a suit, was Olivia. My step faltered. Michael noticed immediately. "Your family's here," he said quietly. "Morgan mentioned she was trying to get them to come. Are you okay?" I squared my shoulders. "Yes. This isn't about them. This is about the veterans who need this facility." He smiled, pride evident in his eyes. "That's my girl." We took our places near the podium. The CEO was listing the contributors and supporters who had made the center possible. When he called my name, describing me as the driving force behind this initiative, whose tireless advocacy and clinical expertise shaped every aspect of the program, I felt a surge of emotion I hadn't expected. Applause filled the air as I stepped up to the microphone. I thanked the necessary people, explained the center's mission, and outlined the services we would provide. My voice grew stronger with each word, my passion evident to everyone listening. "Many of you know I come from a family of helpers," I said, improvising from my prepared remarks. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that helping others shouldn't mean erasing yourself. This center represents not just my commitment to our veterans, but my belief that we all deserve to pursue our purpose without apology. More applause. I caught Michael's eye, saw him beaming at me from the front row. And despite myself, I glanced toward the back, where my family stood. Mom was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Dad looked proud. It was an expression I hadn't seen directed at me in years. Olivia's face was unreadable, a careful mask of neutrality. After the ribbon cutting and the formal tours, I found myself surrounded by well-wishers and colleagues. Michael stayed close, his tall figure and commanding presence creating a natural buffer that allowed me to breathe when the conversations became overwhelming. I was speaking with a local councilwoman when I felt a tap on my shoulder. Turning, I found myself face to face with my parents. "Rachel," Mom said, her voice tentative. "This is incredible." I nodded, unsure what to say. "Thank you for coming." "We wouldn't have missed it," Dad said, and the sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. "We're very proud of what you've accomplished." The words I'd waited decades to hear, finally spoken in a crowded reception hall surrounded by strangers. I felt Michael's hand at the small of my back, a silent show of support. "Lieutenant Colonel Reynolds," my father said, extending his hand to Michael. "It's an honor. Your work with the VA is exemplary." Michael shook his hand firmly. "The honor is mine, sir. Your daughter is the real hero here. Her vision for this center is revolutionary in veteran care." Dad nodded, a hint of embarrassment coloring his features. "We're beginning to understand that." The conversation might have continued, but at that moment, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. Olivia stood there, her expression now clearly distressed, her husband nowhere to be seen. "Excuse me," Mom said quickly, moving toward her younger daughter. Dad hesitated. "Rachel, we'd like to talk, properly, when things are less hectic." I found myself nodding. "I'd like that." As he walked away, Michael turned to me. "You okay?" Surprisingly, yes. And I meant it. There was no anger burning in my chest, no resentment clouding my thoughts. Just a calm certainty that whatever happened next, reconciliation or continued distance, I would be fine either way. The event continued, a swirl of conversations and congratulations. I lost track of my family in the crowd, focused instead on the veterans who approached me with questions and gratitude. These were the people who mattered today, the ones who would benefit from the center, from my dream finally realized. It was nearly sunset when the last guests began to leave. Michael and I stood near the entrance, thanking people as they departed. I was exhausted but exhilarated, the good kind of tired that comes from achievement rather than sacrifice. "Dr. Thornton?" A young veteran in a wheelchair approached us, his service dog at his side. "I just wanted to say thank you. Places like this, they change lives." I knelt to be at eye level with him, warmth flooding my chest. "That's exactly what we hope to do, and please call me Rachel. I'm a nurse, not a doctor." He smiled. "To us, you're a lifesaver, whatever the title." After he left, Michael wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "He's right, you know. What you've built here will change lives." I leaned into him, watching the setting sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. It already changed mine. It was then that I noticed Olivia standing alone near the entrance, watching us. Our eyes met across the distance. For a moment I thought she might approach, might offer some word of congratulation or reconciliation. Instead, she simply nodded once, a gesture that contained neither warmth nor hostility, just acknowledgement. I returned the nod. It wasn't forgiveness, wasn't reconciliation, but it was something. A recognition that we both existed in the world, separate but aware of each other. She turned and walked to her car, shoulders straight, head high. Whatever chaos her choices had created in her life, she would face it without my safety net. It wasn't cruelty that kept me from rushing to her aid. It was respect. Respect for her as an adult who needed to find her own way, and respect for myself as someone who deserved to live unburdened by manipulation. "Ready to go?" Michael asked, not having noticed the exchange. I took one last look at the building behind us. The Thornton Veterans Care Center. My name, my vision, my legacy. "Yes," I said, feeling lighter than I had in years. "I'm ready." 6 months after the opening of the Veterans Care Center, I found myself standing in the quiet solitude of my office, staring at the framed photo on my desk. It wasn't a family portrait or a wedding picture like most of my colleagues displayed. It was a simple shot of the center on opening day, the red ribbons still intact, morning sunlight casting long shadows across the brick facade. Beside it sat a small silver plaque, an award from the Regional Healthcare Association for innovation in specialized care. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my reflection. A text from Michael. "Meeting finished early. Dinner tonight to celebrate?" I smiled, typing back a quick, "Yes. Your place or mine." Our relationship had blossomed in the months since the center opened, growing from professional admiration to something deeper, more profound. Neither of us had rushed it. We were both too familiar with the cost of giving yourself away too quickly, too completely. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Morgan stood there, a rare serious expression on her usually smiling face. "Got a minute?" she asked. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Everything okay?" She settled in, fidgeting with the strap of her purse. "It's about Olivia." My stomach tightened instinctively, an old reflex I was still working to unlearn. "What about her?" "The wedding debt caught up with them. James found out about all of it. The loans, the GoFundMe, everything. They've separated. She's moving back to Vermont next week." I absorbed this information, waiting for the familiar surge of guilt, the impulse to fix, to rescue. It didn't come. Instead, I felt a calm sadness, not for my own involvement, but for the inevitable consequences of choices that had finally arrived. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it, "but I'm not sure why you're telling me." Morgan met my gaze directly. "Mom asked if you'd help her get settled. Find a job, maybe." I told her I'd ask, but that you'd probably say no. I leaned back in my chair, considering. The old Rachel would have immediately rearranged her life, opened her wallet, sacrificed her boundaries. The woman I'd become recognized the request for what it was. Another attempt to pull me back into old patterns. "You're right," I said finally. "I won't do that. But..." I paused, sorting through my thoughts. "I can send her information about the hospital job board. There's always a need for administrative assistance. If she wants to apply, she can, like anyone else would. Morgan nodded, relief evident in her posture. That's more than fair. I'll tell Mom. After she left, I turned back to my computer, but found myself unable to focus on the grant proposal I'd been drafting. Instead, I opened my calendar and blocked off the evening of Olivia's arrival. Not to help her move, not to welcome her with open arms and an open wallet, but to give myself space to process whatever emotions might surface. Setting boundaries wasn't just about saying no to others. It was about saying yes to my own needs, my own healing. The cafe where Michael and I had our first real conversation had become our regular spot, a neutral ground where we could discuss our day over good coffee and better company. That evening, I arrived first, claiming our usual corner table and ordering his preferred dark roast. He appeared precisely at 7, still in uniform, his general's stars catching the light as he navigated between tables. Several patrons glanced up, their expressions a mixture of respect and curiosity. Michael never seemed to notice the attention his presence commanded. It was one of the things I admired most about him, his complete lack of arrogance despite his considerable achievements. "Sorry I'm late," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. The secretary's call ran long. I pushed his coffee toward him. "You're right on time." He took a grateful sip, then studied my face. "Something's on your mind." I smiled despite myself. His ability to read me was both unnerving and comforting. "Olivia's moving back to Vermont. Her marriage is over." His expression remained neutral, but his eyes softened with concern. "For me, not her. How do you feel about that?" It was such a simple question, yet so profound in its respect for my autonomy. Not, "What are you going to do?" or "How will you help?" but "How do you feel?" Acknowledging that my emotions were valid, separate from any expected action. "Conflicted," I admitted. "Part of me feels vindicated. The consequences I warned her about have arrived. But another part just feels sad that she couldn't break the pattern." He nodded, understanding without judgment. "And your parents have asked you to step in?" "Through Morgan, yes. I've declined." "Good," he said simply. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the ambient noise of the cafe washing over us. Finally, Michael reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "I have something to ask you," he said, his voice taking on an uncharacteristic hesitancy. "It's about us." My heart skipped. We'd been dating for months now, but neither of us had pushed for definitions or declarations. We were both cautious souls, shaped by experiences that taught us to move slowly, deliberately. "The Pentagon has offered me a position," he continued. "Director of Veteran Health Initiatives. It would mean moving to Washington." I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. "Oh, I haven't accepted yet," he said quickly. "I wanted to talk to you first. The thing is, Rachel, I don't want to go without you." I blinked, processing his words. "You're asking me to move to Washington?" He squeezed my hand. "I'm asking if you'd consider it. Your center is established now, running smoothly. There's similar work being developed at Walter Reed, programs that could benefit from your expertise. But I understand if your life is here, if you've worked too hard to build this to leave it behind." The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I'd put my life on hold for Olivia's dreams, her needs, her wants. Now, faced with a request from someone who genuinely cared about my happiness, I found myself hesitating. "I need to think about it," I said honestly. "This isn't a no, I need to be sure I'm making this decision for the right reasons." His smile was warm, patient. "Take all the time you need. The right decision is the one that honors who you are now, not who you've been programmed to be." I carried those words with me all week, turning them over in my mind as I conducted patient rounds, reviewed care plans, and mentored new staff members. Who was I now? What did I want my life to look like? These weren't questions I'd allowed myself to consider when I was trapped in the cycle of Olivia's needs and my own enabling behaviors. Friday evening found me in my apartment, surrounded by photo albums I'd pulled from storage. Not the curated collections of Olivia's achievements that had once dominated our family's shelves, but older volumes, dusty with neglect. I opened the first one, revealing pictures from before the pattern of sacrifice had been established. There I was at 7, proudly holding a science fair ribbon. At 10, dressed as Florence Nightingale for Halloween, a makeshift nurse's cap perched atop my unruly hair. At 14, volunteering at the local nursing home, genuine joy radiating from my smile as I sat playing cards with an elderly resident. The passion had always been there, the calling. It wasn't something I'd chosen as a consolation prize. After giving everything to Olivia, it was mine. Always had been. My phone rang, pulling me from my reverie. The screen displayed a number I didn't recognize. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Rachel?" The voice was immediately familiar, though I hadn't heard it in months. "It's Olivia." I sat perfectly still, unsure how to respond. Finally, I managed a neutral, "Hi. I'm back in Vermont," she said, her voice smaller than I remembered. "Morgan gave me your number." "I hope that's okay." "It's fine," I said, surprised to find I meant it. "How are you?" A bitter laugh came through the line. "Honestly? Terrible. Everything fell apart. The marriage, my job in Boston, everything." I waited, silent. The old me would have jumped in with reassurances, offers of help, promises to fix it all. The woman I'd become knew better. "I'm not calling to ask for anything," she continued, as if reading my thoughts. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I know it's not enough. I know it doesn't undo anything. But I am sorry, Rachel. For all of it." I closed the photo album on my lap, tracing the embossed cover with my fingertips. "Thank you for saying that." "Do you think?" She hesitated. "Do you think we could meet sometime? Just to talk?" The question hung between us, heavy with history and hurt. I thought about Michael's words. "The right decision is the one that honors who you are now." "I'm not ready for that," I said honestly. "Maybe someday, but not yet." To my surprise, she didn't argue or guilt me. "I understand. If you ever are ready, I'll be here." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, processing the conversation. There was no anger burning in my chest, no desperate need to rescue her from her circumstances. Just a calm certainty that I had spoken my truth, honored my boundaries, and that was enough. The next morning, I woke early, made coffee, and stood on my small balcony, watching the sunrise paint the Vermont mountains in gold and amber. I'd made my decision. Michael answered on the first ring when I called. "Rachel? Everything okay?" "Yes," I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. "Everything is good, actually. I've been thinking about Washington." "And?" His tone was carefully neutral. "I want to go," I said. "Not for you, although being with you is a significant factor, but because it's the right next step for me professionally. For my dreams." I could hear the smile in his voice. "I was hoping you'd say that." "But," I continued, "I need to do this right. I need 3 months to ensure a smooth transition at the center, to train my replacement, to make sure the veterans we serve don't feel abandoned." "Of course," he said immediately. "I wouldn't expect anything less from you. That's who you are, Rachel. Someone who cares deeply, but now you're learning to care without losing yourself in the process." The validation in his words warmed me more than the morning sun on my face. "There's one more thing," I added. "Before I leave Vermont, I need to make peace with some things. With some people." "Your family?" he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. Not to go back to old patterns, but to close that chapter properly. On my terms." "Whatever you need," he said. "I'm with you." The 3 months passed in a blur of preparation, both professional and personal. At the center, I meticulously documented protocols, trained my successor, a brilliant nurse practitioner named David, who shared my passion for veteran care, and said personal goodbyes to patients who had become like family. At home, I sorted through years of accumulated possessions, donating what I no longer needed, carefully packing what would come with me to my new life in Washington. Each item I handled forced me to confront questions about its place in my future, about what truly mattered. It was during this process that I finally responded to my parents' repeated invitations to dinner. Not at their house. I wasn't ready to step back into that space loaded with memories, but at a neutral restaurant downtown. They were already seated when I arrived, both looking older than I remembered, more subdued. Mom had traded her usual pearls for a simple gold necklace. Dad's customary sports jacket had been replaced by a casual sweater. Small changes that somehow spoke volumes. "Rachel," Mom said, standing to greet me. She moved as if to hug me, then hesitated, reading my body language. Instead, she offered a warm smile. "Thank you for coming." I slid into the seat across from them. "Thank you for suggesting it." The initial conversation was stilted, careful. We discussed safe topics: the weather, local news, the success of the Veterans Center. Only after our meals arrived did Dad clear his throat and address the elephant in the room. "We owe you an apology," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Many apologies, actually." I set down my fork, surprised by his directness. Dad had never been one for emotional conversations. "We've had a lot of time to reflect," Mom added, her eyes meeting mine. "On how we treated you, on what we allowed to happen, on what we encouraged." "Morgan helped us see it," Dad admitted. "After everything with Olivia's marriage fell apart, after you established that center without any support from us, she made us look at the pattern, made us see what we'd done." I took a slow sip of water, gathering my thoughts. "I appreciate that. It couldn't have been easy to hear." Mom's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her napkin. "It wasn't. But it was necessary. We failed you, Rachel. We put all the responsibility on your shoulders, and none of the recognition. We were so focused on helping Olivia shine that we never saw how brightly you were already shining on your own," Dad added. The words I'd waited decades to hear, finally spoken in a quiet restaurant on an ordinary Tuesday evening. They didn't magically heal all wounds, didn't instantly restore trust or erase history, but they were a beginning. "I'm moving to Washington," I said after a moment. "I've accepted a position at Walter Reed, working with veteran rehabilitation programs." Their expressions registered surprise but not disapproval. "That's wonderful," Mom said, and seemed to mean it. Is this related to that military gentleman? The one from the center opening?" I smiled despite myself. "Michael." "Yes, partly. He's been offered a Pentagon position. But it's also the right move for my career. For my dreams." Dad nodded slowly. "You always did want to make a bigger impact. Even as a kid. You talked about changing healthcare systems, not just working within them." The fact that he remembered this about me, a detail I'd assumed long forgotten in the shadow of Olivia's more dramatic aspirations, caught me off guard. Perhaps they had been listening, in their way, all along. "Have you told Olivia?" Mom asked cautiously. "Not yet," I admitted. "We've spoken briefly, but we're not back to regular communication." "She's doing better," Dad offered. "Got a job at the community college. Small apartment downtown. She's learning to stand on her own 2 feet." There was a note of pride in his voice, but a different kind than I remembered. Not the breathless adoration of Olivia's every achievement, but a quieter recognition of genuine growth. "I'm glad to hear that," I said, and meant it. As we finished our meal, Mom hesitantly asked, "Before you leave for Washington, would you consider having coffee with Olivia? Just once? She asks about you all the time." The old Rachel would have immediately agreed, desperate to please, to maintain peace. The woman I'd become took a moment to check in with herself, to honor her own feelings. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "No promises, but I'll consider it." They accepted this without pressure, another small sign of change. When we parted outside the restaurant, Mom hugged me briefly, her embrace tentative but warm. Dad shook my hand, then pulled me into an awkward but sincere hug. "We're proud of you, Rachel," he said quietly. "We should have said it years ago, but we are so very proud." I drove home with their words echoing in my mind, feeling lighter than I had in years. Not because everything was magically fixed, not because the past had been erased, but because I had faced it on my terms and emerged intact. The next morning, after careful consideration, I texted Olivia, "I'm moving to Washington next month. If you'd like to meet for coffee before I go, I'm open to that. Saturday afternoon, 2 p.m., at Riverside Cafe." Her response came almost immediately. "I'll be there. Thank you." When Saturday arrived, I dressed with deliberate care. Not to impress, but to armor myself with confidence. A simple blue dress, comfortable heels, the silver watch Michael had given me. For counting the minutes until we're together in Washington, as he'd put it. I arrived at the cafe early, choosing a table near the window where the afternoon sunlight streamed in. I ordered my coffee and waited, watching the door with a calm I wouldn't have thought possible a year ago. Olivia entered precisely at 2, looking both familiar and strange. Gone were the designer clothes, the perfect makeup, the carefully cultivated image of effortless success. Instead, she wore simple jeans, a plain sweater, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She spotted me immediately, her steps hesitant as she approached. "Hi," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." I nodded, studying her face, the same features I'd known all my life, but somehow rearranged. There was a new humility in her eyes, a quietness that hadn't been there before. "Mom mentioned you're working at the community college?" I offered, starting with neutral ground. "Administrative assistant in the nursing department, ironically enough," she said with a small smile. "It's entry level, but it's a start. I'm also taking night classes. Accounting." "That's great," I said, meaning it. She fidgeted with her coffee cup. "Rachel, I don't know where to begin. I've practiced this conversation 100 times in my head, but now that I'm here." "You don't need to explain," I said. "I understand patterns, how they form, how hard they are to break." "But I want to," she insisted. "I need to. For years, I took advantage of your generosity. I manipulated you, lied to you, used you as my personal ATM. And the worst part is, I convinced myself it was normal, that I deserved it somehow. I didn't confirm or deny her words, just let them hang in the air between us. When everything fell apart, the marriage, the fake image I'd created, I had to face who I really was," she continued. "And I didn't like that person very much." "And now?" I asked quietly. She met my gaze directly. "Now I'm trying to be someone I can respect, someone who stands on her own 2 feet, who takes responsibility, who pays her own way." The sincerity in her voice touched something in me, not the old need to rescue, but a new capacity for cautious hope. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she added quickly. "I haven't earned that yet, maybe I never will, but I wanted you to know that I see it now. What I did, what we all did to you. And I'm so deeply sorry, Rachel." I took a slow sip of my coffee, considering my response. "Thank you for saying that. It matters that you recognize it." "Are you happy?" she asked suddenly. "In your life, in your career? With that military guy Morgan mentioned?" The question surprised me with its genuine interest, its lack of competitive edge. "I am," I said simply. "Happier than I've been in a long time." She nodded, a small smile touching her lips. "Good. You deserve that. You always did." We talked for another hour, not about the past, but about the present. About her classes, my preparations for Washington, the Veterans Center. Not as close sisters, not as friends even, but as 2 adults finding a new way to exist in each other's orbit. As we prepared to leave, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small wrapped package. "I got you something, a going-away present. It's not expensive. I'm on a strict budget these days, but when I saw it, I thought of you." I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a simple journal, bound in soft leather, with the words, my story, my terms, embossed on the cover. For your new chapter, she explained. Written by you, for you. I ran my fingers over the embossed letters, unexpectedly moved by the thoughtfulness of the gift. Thank you, Olivia. It's perfect. Outside the cafe, we stood awkwardly for a moment, neither sure how to end this meeting that wasn't quite reconciliation, wasn't quite closure, but something in between. I hope Washington is everything you want it to be, she said finally. I hope someday we can be real sisters again. Not like before, but something healthier. I nodded, allowing myself to consider the possibility. Maybe, one step at a time. She surprised me by offering her hand, a formal gesture that somehow felt right for this moment. I took it, our handshake brief but genuine. Goodbye, Rachel, she said. Or maybe just see you later. See you later, I echoed, finding I meant it. As I watched her walk away, I felt no urge to call her back, no desperate need to fix her life or insert myself into her story. Just a quiet acknowledgement that her path was hers to walk, as mine was my own. 1 month later, I stood in the empty apartment that had sheltered me through the most transformative year of my life. The furniture was gone, donated or shipped ahead to Washington. The walls were bare, the closets empty. Only the echoes remained. I did one final walkthrough, checking drawers and corners, saying goodbye to the space that had witnessed my metamorphosis. In the kitchen, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Cars packed. Ready when you are, General's orders. I smiled, typing back. On my way, sir. As I locked the door for the final time, I felt no regret, no hesitation. Only a deep, settled certainty that I was moving toward something, not running away. Michael waited by his car, tall and steady in civilian clothes, his presence an anchor in the sea of change. He took my hand as I approached, his eyes searching my face. Any second thoughts? He asked. I shook my head. Not one. He smiled, that warm, genuine smile that had become essential to my world. Then let's go build something new. Together. As we drove out of Vermont, the mountains that had witnessed my entire life receding in the rearview mirror, I opened the journal Olivia had given me. On the first blank page, I wrote a single sentence. This is the story of Rachel Thornton, told by Rachel Thornton, for Rachel Thornton. It wasn't an ending, it was a beginning, my beginning, on my terms, at last. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.